Hello everyone, this is Arpan. In this video, I'll demonstrate how to create a cluster in vCenter server, and the cluster will be enabled with Vsphere HA, means Vsphere High Availability, and Vsphere DRS, that is Dynamic Resource Scheduler, enabled. So to give your virtual machines, those are running in the ESXi host, high availability or fault tolerance, to make sure that the VM connectivity is always on, you have to enable HA and DRS rules into the cluster. So to create the cluster, what I did in my vCenter server, I have created a folder called cluster. Under the cluster, I have created a data center. So to create the data center, you just right click on the folder or the vCenter server itself. You'll have an option called create data center. So I have created a data center called cluster TC, and in that cluster TC, what I did, I created a cluster called ESXi cluster _1. So right now I'll be creating once again a new cluster. So I'll right click to a data center, I'll select the option new cluster. So as you can see, it has given me the cluster wizard. So I'll give a name, let's say like ESXi cluster, something, any sort of name you want. Then the most important things comes like turn on Vsphere HA and then turn on Vsphere DRS. So let me give you a brief description about what does Vsphere HA, means Vsphere High Availability, does. So as you can see, it has given here, it detects the failures and provides rapid recovery. So what does HA do? It basically selects a master host and the slave hosts based on the resources that those hosts add. That means, like in a cluster, when you'll be adding the host, based on the resources the hosts are having, HA will select a master host. That master host will be communicating with other slave hosts through heartbeat in each and every second. So if the master host doesn't receive a heartbeat from any slave host, then it will try to ping the data store in the slave host. If it doesn't receive a ping from the data store itself, then the master host will declare that the slave host is network isolated. So whatever I have explained, you can configure in the next steps that will come up soon. And for Vsphere DRS, means Dynamic Resource Scheduler, the main task for this DRS is to maintaining the load balance. So once HA is powering on the VMs in another host in case of host failures, let's say HA is powering on a host which doesn't have enough of resources, or which may get very low once some of the VMs are coming up from a different host. So DRS will make sure that the load is being balanced based on the physical resources that the ESXi boxes are having. So right now I'll turn on both the features, HA and DRS. Then I'll click on next. So this is the Vsphere DRS automation level. So if you are keeping the automation level as manual, then in case of host failure, once we'll go to the clusters DRS tab, you can see that vCenter will recommend you that this host has been failed, so in which host you want to migrate the VMs. In case of partially automated, vCenter will select the server. It will automatically calculate where the VMs should be migrated because the ESXi where the VMs were residing previously is down or is network isolated. So it'll select the ESXi host, but still it will ask you to apply the recommendations. So once you'll apply the recommendations, then only the VMs will be migrated, or else it won't be. But you'll always have to select the fully automated, because it's not possible for you to every time open the DRS tab and click see the recommendation and click on this apply recommendation button. So in case of fully automated, what DRS will do in case of any host failure, it'll automatically migrate the VMs into the ESXi host. So this is the migration threshold, that is conservative to aggressive. So in that case, I'm gonna give a migration threshold as medium, so it doesn't make any constraints about the cluster or its cluster resources. So that I'll hit on next. So this is the dynamic power management. So there are basically three options, like off, manual and automatic. So this dynamic power management will manage the hosts that are there in the ESXi cluster and that are the part of this ESXi cluster. So if you're keeping it off, then let's say in some scenarios that your ESXi server is there in your cluster, but it doesn't have any VM or the cluster doesn't require it. So in that case, it'll turn off the ESXi host. If it is in manual, then again, if you're going to the DRS tab, then it will recommend you that this ESXi host is not being used by the cluster, or there are enough resources that can be distributed by the other host but not this host. So do you want to turn off this ESXi box? Or in this case of automatic, as you can see, like vCenter will automatically execute power management related recommendation. I mean, it will automatically may turn off any ESXi box, or it may turn on as well if it was turned off. So here also the DPM threshold is there from conservative to aggressive. I'll hit on next. So here comes the HA part. So as I explained previously, whenever HA will detect there is any host failures, so what it'll do, it'll try to migrate the VMs in another host, and where those hosts will be migrated, that will be defined by the DRS policies based on the resources that hosts are having. So here I'm enabling the host monitoring. So if you're not enabling the host monitoring, then HA cannot detect that any of the host is being failed or multiple hosts are being failed. Then the next part comes at admission control. So in case of admission control, you can violate the availability constraints. Let's say one of the ESXi box, it doesn't have enough of resource to support VM, but still if you are enabling it, that the VMs can be migrated to the ESXi box, but that may affect your cluster. And another thing is like admission control policy. So in case of host failure, how many host failure can your cluster tolerate? So the best practice is to keep this option only rather than the other two. So this is the VM restart priority and host response, host isolation response. So in case your host is down and your HA is migrating the hosts, migrating the VMs that are running on the host to a different ESXi. So once it is migrated, then how you want to see the VM, whether it's low, medium, or high. So obviously you need to keep on high. So whenever any migration will happen in case of host failure, so as soon as the migration is done, then HA will restart the VM on the new host. And same, that is the host isolation response. So once host is isolated, so the VM will be migrated and it will be powered on. So this is the VM monitoring. VM monitoring is like if your VMs are having this VMware tools installed, so in that case vCenter not only monitors your ESXi but also your VMs as well. So here the VM monitoring, I'm gonna enable it. And in case of VM and application monitoring, if you are enabling VMware application monitoring, then vCenter can monitor the operating system itself that is installed on the VM. So in case of VM monitoring, it will only see the VM, and in case of VM and application, it's gonna monitor both VM and the operating system. So here also the sensitivity is low to high. This is the EVC. So in enhanced vMotion compatibility, let's say one of your host is down and HA is migrating the VMs into another host, but this new host doesn't have the same CPU configuration as the source host. So if you're enabling EVC for this cluster, so in that case, if there is a difference between the CPUs which are these hosts are having, then also it will not affect the migrations. So there are two options, like you can enable it for AMD host, host which are having AMD processor, or which hosts which are having Intel processor. So this is a swap file. So basically swap file will be located where the VM files are located. So this is the final settings. Then I'll finish on yes. So right now I'll be adding a host into my ESXi cluster, or vCenter cluster. So I'll click on add host by selecting the cluster. So here I'm gonna keep the host name or the IP address of my ESXi box, but in case of if you're giving the host name or the FQDN of the ESXi box, so you have to make sure that your ESXi is added to the domain, or else its host name cannot be resolved by the vCenter. So here I'm giving the host name, host IP in this case, and the root username and the password. So it is giving me again the certificate warning. So my ESXi host has been connected to the vCenter. As you can see, it is showing the vendor, that is Dell, model is PowerS2950, and which is the ESXi version, and if any virtual machines are running in that ESXi which you're adding into the cluster. So here also you can assign license. So you have to make sure you're not enabling this lockdown mode, because if you're enabling the lockdown mode, then you are not gonna change anything. You can't change any sort of configuration in that ESXi. So the resource pool, so right now I'm not creating a resource pool. That is the summary tab. I'll click on finish. So as you can see in the recent task, my host is being added. and here it is showing the status. So whatever task you're going to perform on this Vsphere Center in this task and eve alarms, you can see this one. So as you can see, my ESXi host has been added, but probably because of this license stuff, it is showing me the warning sign. And as the host is added, it is configuring the Vsphere HA, and later on it will configure the DRS. So for this video, that's it. Thank you very much for watching.